My name is Robert Schwegler. I'm from Deutsche Telekom. And despite the fact that Philip said it might be pretty boring in development in Deutsche Telekom, it's not true. So part of us is a really cool team. And we are going also agile and modern technology, cloud things. And I want to talk about the best practices which I experienced in Deutsche Telekom, but also in other companies and other domains in which I worked. And therefore, I thought about talking about cloud, and a marketing colleague of mine asked, damn cloud, call it ClearSky. So let's see where it comes about. The storyline which I'm telling you is, first of all, why ClearSky, then a cloud definition, and then I want to give you two best practices which I found during my career for critical for user definitions, so what a user should expect from cloud technology and where he should really focus on. And then two critical supplier duties, which I think most important right now in development area. So it's a mixture between technology. I go in some parts pretty deep, but other it's clear advice on some technologies which I think should be used. So from cloud to ClearSky, the guy said, yeah, there are so many attributes on this cloud theme. What do I have to take care for? And at the end, he does not want to take care for all of that. For him, it's shady. Cloud is negative for the marketing guys. So they asked me, can we not do something different? Can we not do ClearSky? So let's see what it is all about. Definition of cloud. I have checked what others think about cloud, and there are 5 important topics which are coming across when you think about cloud. The first one is should be service-based, and there is most of the topic in it. Service-based with APIs, strong SLA, interfaces. Then a second one, it should be scalable and elastic, which is not necessarily an attribute for cloud technology. It is in general. I worked once in a travel industry, and we also were able to create a service. You know this flight search when you want to book a flight? So this is a B2B application. It has the 75 big airlines on top of it running out of Erding, and it has 400 changes per month, this application. This is crazy, with 9 people only doing it, exercising it. So then for sure you want to meter the use of the cloud or the service which you want to use. And then there are 2 strange attributes attributed to cloud. One is shared economies of scale. This is not really a user attribute, but more a supplier benefit that you can provide a service that has economies of scale, so that you can produce it cheap. And then whether it uses internet technology or not is not really an attribute for the user. It's an attribute which claims that it is modern and it is open. But let's see, these 2 things, the last 2, are internal competitive advantages. I think they are not really a benefit to the end users. Let me spend some time on the metering. I think the metering is a very interesting one because if you want to meter a service, you want to have it contractually defined, that you can meter the service precisely and as easy as possible. A small company which belongs to Telekom has done a tremendous job, especially on these things. And they have a COO who comes in the morning in the office, opens an Excel with a magic macro, clicks on it, and then he can call his operations guys and says, hey guys, why do I use 3 instances more on this server and it costs me $30 more than yesterday? Tell me. Oh, we forgot to switch it off. So they can switch it off by configuration. Boom, you have less cost. This is what this feedback cycle, typically in a big company, is only on a yearly basis possible, or these quarterly readjustments on planning. In these small companies, or with these cloud technologies and the right tools to grab this information from the website, you're able to do it on a daily basis, correct or control your cost. So this is amazing. So when I always tell it back to our controlling guys, they go berserk, they want to have it. But it's a long way to go there for a big affiliated company. The second interesting user demand, which I see, is how you import and export data. So this is not very often taken care of. And it is important that your data is secure, done deal. But the interesting part is how can you import it and how can you export it. And this import and export is not just a plain API, it's special APIs. It's bulk APIs or message data APIs. How many of you provide a cloud service or something like this? Does somebody? Have you bulk service APIs? Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's more and more becoming important, and the customers should demand it. So I just know of a good example is Omniture, the pixel tracker. They have a pretty good interface which allows you to export data so that you can reuse it, you can store it locally, you can do audit logs on it, you can do data backup of this data which is produced on the website so that you have it on your side. And I think it would be good if you do it consistently and you add it into the contract, because it enables you to switch. I mean, one of the big promises with the cloud services is that you can switch the cloud service provider, but you can only do if you preserve your data. If you don't own your data anymore, and be careful in the contracts, you don't always get access to your data. So make sure in the contract you get access to your data. So this was more on the user side, and nevertheless, this also applies to the supplier side. So if you provide a service, you need to take care for this demand as well. I guess you should. Now, coming to two best practices which I see on the supplier side, and there I spend a little bit more time. So the interesting part is that there is a systemic approach to deliver a very good service. What does it mean? So there is a very old quote, and I think it is very interesting. Organizations which design systems are constrained to produce designs which are copies of the communication structures of these organizations. That's very old. It is from Melvin Conway from 1968, pretty old. And this says, or he made the observation that if you asked a team, one team, create a compiler, they create a one-pass compiler. He asked then 3 teams, create me a compiler, and they created a 3-pass compiler. So now when you look in your organizations, and me as architect, I have done these kind of things, discovering the as-is architecture, and then afterwards show it to a specialized in organizational development. If you have the luxury to add the year number when the system has been created, you see all reorganizations in the architecture. Pretty interesting. So, unfortunately, it is also vice versa. So if you have an organization, it establishes a system, then the system drives the organization. So it holds itself stable. It's very hard for management to make changes to an established system, especially as the older it gets. It's like a traumatized or a rusted structure which you cannot bend very easily anymore. It has also been used from in therapy forms by Bert Hellinger, who makes family constellation. In German, it's Familienaufstellungen. Very powerful tool. So if people have problems in their family, they lay out their family on paper, and how they are oriented to each other describes the relationship, the bonding, and also the problems. And it's so powerful that if you use then people, volunteers, to step into these papers, it's just papers, they suddenly get the feeling of the persons. So this has been transferred also to organization checkouts and reorganizations. So there is a book by Peter M. Senge about fifth discipline, but also people are now educated out of this therapeutic field from family constellations to organization constellations. So this is totally crazy. You have then organizations who are interrelated, and some of them talk to each other, some not. And you can lay it out on paper. You can see their organization to each other. And it's done right now outside there to then create a healing organization picture. Pretty interesting. Now, what does this have to do with service supplier? Let's see. I give you a very positive example and then some others. I was in the last company where I was, gaming company, we created a new poker system in Sweden. The guys are very good designers. And we allowed them to have an open office space, and they were just sitting around and regrouping and finding, and they had the task to use the knowledge of the last version to build a completely new version of the poker system. So they sat around and they grouped and regrouped, and the system, it was a poker system designed for 250,000 concurrent players, grew. But it was rebuilt and rebuilt. It didn't get stable from an architectural point of view, also from a design point of view. So we were very desperate in the management team, and we gave deadlines. Didn't help. Just some people started to quit. So then we were completely desperate, so we moved in these viewing shields, Spanish walls, right? So these rolling walls. So we moved them in, just in a corner. Suddenly the people used them to get a little bit of protection area, and so the groups started to settle down just because of these Spanish walls. That was amazing. So the next step we did is, hooray, now they are settling in. So we built real walls, the thin ones, but we built real walls according to the seating they have chosen. And then the architecture settled, because the people were not moving so much anymore. The communication channels between the teams through the doors were limited. Just slightly, yeah? Slightly, but they were limited. And suddenly we had a stable architecture. We did just one fault. We forgot to check on the size of the teams and what team is furthest to the goal and which one not. So we should have taken the client programming team a little bit bigger, so more space, precautiously. We didn't do that, so that's a learning lesson. But that was pretty interesting to me, the vice versa. So how it works the other way around, if you establish the right environment, you get then the stable architecture you need. And the other way around, if you leave it open, you get the discussion going. So the systemic approach is a relation between the organization, the processes, and the portfolio management. All three layers need to be taken in consideration. And this is, for me, as architect, the extension from normal architecture to enterprise architecture. You take the holistic picture. So how does it look like? The service organization, which deals more and more today in an agile way, with agile methods, groups a bunch of people who might be experts in some area, but can work together with other roles, and create a service which is highly automated, and deliver that as services and processes into as a complete service. So there is one small remark which I made. I think processes are typically not very agile because typically a business analyst jumps in, looks what the people are doing, writes it down to his best understanding, and then imposes this suboptimal process again back to the people who have to work with it. And when we think about agile principles, it does not work. I mean, it should work for normal processes, right? Filing in a vacation request. Who wants to do it very creatively? Nobody. But for other processes, I think you want a different approach. And I just lately found a nice company, Metasonic, who provides a subject-oriented business process management. That was totally interesting because it fits perfectly to these agile methods where you put a person in the center, the subject. That's one of the roles a person can embody in an organization. And then you look just for two elements: input, what do I get, and output, what do I give out. And first of all, it can be very unstructured information, like email, text. I get something, somebody wants me to do something, and I then magic, work and do something, and then I give it out to somebody else and make him to do some successive work. And the interesting part is that this system provides you with a tool set which allows you to oscillate between executing a workflow, maybe in a bad manner at first time, and then going into a design view of your process, checking out how you can improve the input so that you can work better. For example, I need a figure of the volume from you. As architect, I would ask the business guys, tell me how much transactions, how much is it allowed to cost. So euro signs. So I start adding attributes which are strong typed. So my input gets better and better. Some of the parts I can automate. Some of the parts I work magically. And then I do the same with my other associates. So, and I think this is pretty amazing move. This seems to be a movement. It's also now in the Gartner evaluation, so this is a special field. It's not BPM, it's SBPM. And it fits very good to this agile principle. So the important thing which I want to make here is that this is a complete service. It's people, it's intelligent processes which are flexible, reacting to the outside world, and you're extremely fast, and therefore you need to highly automate what you can automate. May it be here, or may it be here on the process level. And this all versus today's setup, where you have these organizational silos, business development, analysis. So this is pretty cumbersome to align these people. Here you do it upside down. And the interesting thing is, you go even further. You group then these kind of services and make a kind of composite pattern, the service of services. And this works from an agile point of view pretty good, because you think or you assume that these services are self-sustained and work with their own responsibility. What I want to point you to, if you don't know, the small name on the left side, or your right side, Tom Graves. So for architects in here, this is a must-read. So he explains how to decompose these kind of services from an enterprise level down to a person with eCanvas. It's extremely compelling how he describes it. The only disadvantage is there is no tool support, it doesn't work, but it gives you very, very good guidance on how the services should be structured. And I guess, as Philip said it beforehand, it does not come free. So there are huge advantages. It aligns extremely well with business services, because if you group your services according to this technical services, to business partners, then you can really manage the business, you can report on business, you can structure the costs according to the demand. This is possible. It supports these agile methodologies if you have this grouping tree, this composite pattern on the service level, and you reuse the technical services. Challenges are, and I'm running through this at Deutsche Telekom because it's a huge organization, is governance. So how do you control what's being built all around? How do you get a grip on it? Cost control is possible if you have this service bottom-up approach, otherwise it's very hard. And if you want to do or conduct a huge overhaul of your system or replacement, this is pretty complex because you need to convince all these teams, or you need to have a very strong governance to go top-down through the organization. Good. So Philip talked about agile methods. I also want to ponder a little bit about it, on it. The interesting thing with agile methods is, I think the world is turning towards it. I just want to make a distinction that there is work, these creative work, which you want to attack in an agile mode because it's best suited for it. But then there is also work which is very repetitive. In the best possible solution, you automate it, but if not, there are people out there who just want to come to work, be there 8 hours and go home, right? So, and that's the right work for him. I think we have a kind of two-class workforce. The ones who want to be into it and love their work and want to contribute, and the others who just want to get paid and be somewhere else, right? And we have to deal with both, I think. So, but in the agile world, you have higher service identification when you introduce these kinds of agile methodologies, which leads to more efficiency, which is great. But higher efficiency leads to more frequent deployments with smaller changes, reducing the risks and test effort. Risk-based testing, something like that can be introduced. That's good. But then you have a strong need for faster and more frequent deployment with high degree of automation. Now, I'm talking about really huge systems, so 300, 400 servers, 1,000 servers, and in there, you still want to deploy as fast as possible. So if you get customer complaints, bugs, you can fix them on demand and go out with it. So what I have seen is you can only do that if you categorize your requirements and also your changes. What does it mean? So this is now a little bit more technical part. The requirements categories, you need to distinguish between a defect, an enhancement, new feature requests, the small things, and then the bigger chunks. You need to define links to change categories, which are coming down, and then map to logical application structure, so to report on the quality of the elements. And this hopefully automated. These 5 to 7 change categories, what I mean with that is that you have these change categories defined from an operations point of view, because the ultimate goal is to not involve the IT operations guys. You want to deploy without them. ITIL says you have to inform them, but there is a very, very simple thing. It's called a pre-authorized change. So, for example, if you do a code change and you change not your infrastructure, not your firewalls, not anything else, it's just a code change. There is no necessity to involve the ITIL guys, the ITIL process in big things, but you just go out with your new code. So therefore, this is a very small change, and this is what I'm voting for, because at the end, if you have such an incentive that you tell the product managers and also then the product owners, hey, if you do a small change, you get in 4 hours in an optimized way. Or if you do a service pack change, a big change, then you need to wait for the next big schedule, yeah, whatever it is, 6 weeks, or the next sprint, 4 weeks, 2 weeks, whatever you have as schedule. the incentive is pretty high that you suddenly have talents discovered, product managers or product owners, who go for lunch with the engineers and ask them, how can I split up this damn task which I have at hand? And they give them advice, and then they enter it and make it smaller and smaller and smaller so that you can execute faster and faster. So this was amazing. There was one lady in my career who was extremely successful with it, and all the other guys had to make these huge project requests, and she just did it in small slices. So the idea behind these 5 to 7 change categories is to automate the requirement to delivery as much as possible and minimize the involvement of test and deployment staff. Also, database engineers, architects, all these supporting roles. And it implicitly increases the quality. Because you typically, if you have a small change, you know what you change and you can do a risk-based testing. So coming to, as a consequence to that, to continuous delivery, you need to measure it, because otherwise nobody believes it. Typically, you can increase the throughput, or when I started in this travel industry, we had 12 people who were completely on the verge of being exhausted, and they were just dealing with 7 servers and 7 instances, J2EE, this application. And when we were through with the automation, we made 400 changes per month with 9 people. So that's how it can run. But what you should do is check the effect on the separation between the different change categories, how many you need. You can start with 2, 3, 4, up to 7, depending on your architecture. So if you have a 3-tier architecture, you need more. If you have a 2-tier architecture, less. You need to conduct polls before the introduction and afterwards. You measure the number of involved roles per change category, because this is really the sweet spot. You want to involve as few people as possible for a certain task. And then the number of changes per change category and the number of requirements per requirements category. And you will see when you apply this kind of pattern, you will move from big changes to more and more small changes. The ITIL guys will scream and say, yeah, but then we don't have control. No, they have. They just don't have control over the code. And this they never had. They don't have anyhow. So this increases implementation speed for changes of small change categories. The small changes are executed as ITIL pre-authorized changes. And you have to communicate the measured results. So this is working pretty well. The maximum of automation for small changes or / releases is a key objective to be fast. And then also, this has a positive effect to the end consumer or your B2B partner, that when you get a bug raised, you can deliver it within days. That's amazing. So, as a roundup, ClearSky is for me just the opposite of cloud. The marketing guy who made me aware of that said, why do IT guys always talk about these technology terms or negative terms? I think cloud is not really negative, but that's his perception, so I called it ClearSky. For me, it's the same. The interesting part is what I did in the definition, but I want you to ask yourself, what does it mean for me or my organization to deliver a cloud-based service, and how could I best structure the organization so that it serves with this services approach, which I find very tempting and is best explained by Tom Graves, which I encourage you to take a sneak peek, can structure the organization pretty well. The critical user demands for me today, which I see not much, is metering, close to real-time metering, so that you get most out of the service, and second, import-export, so that you can really move from one service provider to another. And then as service provider, as supplier, I think this service-oriented approach with a systemic approach should be thought of so that you can grow. So when we heard the talk about in new economy, in a new company, it's all crazy, it's not. There is a gene implanted in a small company which helps it grow and direct it in a certain direction. So this implant drives its organizational growth, and it should be thought of from the very beginning. It helps a lot. Last but not least, if you want to be fast and deliver value to the customer, the last point, agile and continuous delivery, the balance is needed, is important. So from this point, I want to invite you to go to the ClearSky and any questions. Thank you.